aka Powders, welcome back to the channel, and TGIF. Today we're discussing Marvel's greatest franchise, because I was there when the X-Men were hotter than hot. They're returning to comic books, but we're all weary, we're all skeptical, and there's a lot of conversation about the 3 announced titles and those involved. We're just going to have a quick look and a little bit of an analysis of why we're getting so much pushback with what should be celebrated, but it's not. So let's go. Alright, aka Powders, wrapping up week 2 of IT Crisis. Welcome to one of my offices. Yeah, no one's really busy here, but TGIF. Welcome back to the channel. Peter A DeLuca here, aka Pad69, and stay with me. Known throughout the entire Philadelphia area, the multiverse, and Europe as your eclectic one in some tight circles known as the pop culture Pope. Yeah, so when I say I was there for the X-Men, I literally was buying New Mutants off the rack when Rob Liefeld was on the book. To me at the time, I was way more into Will Sportacio's portrayal of the X-Men in Uncanny X-Men versus Jim Lee. And I was there when X-Force dropped. I was there when X-Men #1, the Adjective List, the greatest selling comic book of all time, when all of these books dropped, I was there. When the X-Men animated series premiered, I was in KB Toys buying Toy Biz action figures, as a blistering adult. More on that later. But we were playing the video games, the X-Men arcade. I remember going down to the Jersey Shore on the boardwalk, and the X-Men, if they had the full range where you can get 4 to 6 people playing that game, it sucked up your quarters, and you would commit time and you would try and memorize what arcade on the immensely long Jersey boardwalk had X-Men in the arcade. And then we march along, home consoles, and for years X-Men was just mostly comic books and video games. And then Bryan Singer comes, that X-Men movie hits, but then along the way, the X-Men lost their way, and the X-Men lost their way before any of the modern criticisms fall in. And what exactly is the X-Men losing their way? What do I really mean by that? Well, my counterparts, my contemporaries will say it's a social justice warrior era of American comic books and diversity hires, and what that translates to is not letting the characters be the characters, the story speak for themselves, and merit-based talent within the industry, where we're getting handouts, we're getting people who really shouldn't be writing, or even in a lot of cases drawing comic books, and they're there just because they hit a checkbox. Now, a lot of these things are true, but we have to be mindful of what exactly happened to the X-Men post Onslaught. Onslaught and the Age of Apocalypse wrapped up what was, at the time, comic books' greatest mysteries. Exactly what was the future that Cable was coming from. Exactly who was going to stop the assassination that led into, the Sentinels and everything else taking over. The X-Men were coming from a dreary, dystopian future. Even characters like Gambit, knowing that Gambit at one time would be one of the sole survivors of the X-Men, all of these ideas, they were nothing but fun. All the mystery around the origin of Wolverine and where Wolverine came from. So we had assassinations, we had Terminator-like features that we were trying to avoid. We had X-Men survivors that we knew were true to have survived in this future timeline. But then, guess what happens? We get Executioner's Song, we get some of the Onslaught dribbled in there, but we get a revelation, we get an explanation. Even within the pages of Cable, we get, finally, the confrontation of Cable and Apocalypse. So, all the areas of the map were filled in. And then where do the X-Men go from there? In my opinion, the X-Men is a line. It's a path. It's a path from new giant size X-Men #1 all the way into and throughout the Onslaught saga. At that point, you can pretty much say that the X-Men are over. They have won and they have defeated the most evil of evil and survived that Marvel comic book universe, sacrificing the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, characters like Thor, all go into a pocket universe later to become Heroes Reborn. But then along the way, the X-Men, way before the SJW era, lost their way. The storylines, the inner line crossovers, and the new characters never really came back and never really resonated. Sure, we give some credit to Joss Whedon and Astonishing X-Men breathing new life into it, but I'd like to say that geniuses like Alan Moore destroyed what was a wonderful team dynamic for two comic book lines, Youngblood and Wildcats. And very similar, Grant Morrison did it to X-Men. He destroyed the value of that line, and a lot of people like to pretend and back up those stories as being thought-provoking and pivotal to comic book storytelling. What they did was they stripped the superhero from the superheroes. So by the time the SJW era came along, it was all low-hanging fruit, and not a lot of it was valuable, and in my opinion, it was all up for grabs. Now, we also get Fox stepping in, using the IP that they had the rights to, and X-Men movies, X-Men this, X-Men that, and Marvel got sick of seeing that, and they put out this initiative to everything that the X-Men were will now become a Inhuman, because Marvel and Marvel Studios and Disney now controls the Inhumans, but they don't control the X-Men. Someone called me a lawyer for some of those copyright from some of those copyright laws, but no, and it's all fair in love and war. So Marvel tried to duplicate some of the success and appeal of the X-Men, later to just fall completely flat, and no one really wants to revisit the X-Men / Inhumans era. So the SJW time marches on, and it's all low-hanging fruit. We don't get good premiered characters. We get some interesting Phantom X, even Cassandra Xavier, the Cassandra Nova. These are somewhat slightly interesting characters, but they really don't thrill us, and they don't move the needle. Even back during the day, characters like Omega Red and Maverick thrilled us way more than anything else that came later. The X-Men has been a dying franchise for decades, and we're all pretending that they can get it back, in which they will not. We should be more aggressive into creating, discovering, and forwarding that next X-Men, and let the X-Men go the way of the Shadow, or the original Captain Marvel, go the way of the Phantom, Roy Rogers, Lone Ranger, the list goes on. And we need, as a collective, find something new. AKA Padders, I love you guys. Happy Friday. Rock and roll.